The ancient monastery stood alone atop a rugged cliff, its stone walls weathered by centuries of relentless winds and rain. The setting sun cast long, ominous shadows that seemed to whisper secrets to the encroaching night. Inside, the monks went about their evening prayers, their chants echoing through the grand hall, a testament to their unwavering devotion. Brother Samuel, the youngest of the monks, felt a chill in the air as the candles flickered around him. As night fell, the monastery transformed into a labyrinth of darkness and silence. Brother Samuel found himself walking the dimly lit corridors, the only sounds being his own footsteps and the distant howling wind. He was on his way to the library, a sanctuary of knowledge that brought him comfort. Yet tonight, an inexplicable unease gnawed at him. He reached the heavy oak door and pushed it open, the creaking hinges breaking the silence. Inside, the library was as it always was, rows upon rows of ancient tomes and manuscripts. Samuel selected a book on the history of their order, hoping to find solace in the familiar words. He sat by the window, the moonlight casting a pale glow on the pages. Just as he began to read, a whisper slithered through the air. He froze, straining to listen. "Samuel." The voice was faint, barely more than a breath, but it was enough to send a shiver down his spine. He looked around, but the library was empty. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice trembling. The only response was the rustling of pages, as if the books themselves were whispering secrets. He stood up, heart pounding, and moved towards the door, his eyes scanning every shadow. As he reached the corridor, the whisper came again, louder this time. "Samuel." It seemed to come from the direction of the chapel. Driven by a mix of curiosity and fear, he followed the sound, his footsteps echoing in the deserted hallways. The chapel doors were slightly ajar, a sliver of light spilling into the darkness. He pushed them open and stepped inside. The chapel was empty, save for the flickering candles and the haunting echo of the monks' earlier prayers. Samuel walked down the aisle, the whispering growing more insistent. At the altar, he stopped. There on the cold stone floor was a small, tattered book that he had never seen before. He picked it up, its cover worn and pages yellowed with age. As he opened it, a gust of wind blew through the chapel, extinguishing the candles and plunging the room into darkness. Panic set in, and Samuel fumbled to light a candle. When the flame finally flickered to life, he gasped. The pages of the book were filled with names, each one scratched out except for the last, Samuel. Beneath his name, the words, "Join us," were scrawled in dark, red ink. The whisper came again, right next to his ear. "Samuel, join us." He turned, but there was no one there. The air grew colder, and shadows seemed to move on their own. Terrified, he clutched the book to his chest and ran from the chapel, the whispers following him like a dark cloud. That night, sleep eluded him. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard the whispers, felt the cold breath on his neck. The monastery, once a place of peace and sanctuary, now felt like a prison of shadows and fear. And deep within its ancient walls, something was watching, waiting, and whispering his name. The morning light struggled to penetrate the thick fog that had settled around the monastery, casting an eerie glow over the ancient stone structure. The monks gathered in the refectory for breakfast, their usual murmurs of greeting replaced by an uneasy silence. Brother Samuel sat apart, his eyes hollow with the memory of the previous night's encounter. The tattered book he had found lay hidden under his robe, its ominous message haunting his thoughts. Brother Thomas, a devout and well-respected monk known for his unwavering faith, noticed Samuel's distress and approached him, Brother Samuel, you seem troubled. Is there something on your mind? Samuel hesitated, glancing around to ensure no one else was listening. I heard whispers last night, and I found this. He pulled out the tattered book and handed it to Thomas. Thomas frowned as he examined the book, his face growing pale as he read the list of names. This is deeply disturbing. We must take this to Abbot Gregory. They found Abbot Gregory in his study, a small room filled with ancient texts and religious artifacts. The abbot, a wise and stern man, listened intently as Thomas and Samuel recounted the events of the previous night. He took the book from Thomas, his brow furrowing as he read the chilling message. This monastery has stood for centuries, Abbot Gregory said slowly. It has seen its share of dark times, but we've always persevered through faith and prayer. We will pray for guidance and protection. In the meantime, I will investigate this further. The day passed in a haze of nervous anticipation. As night fell once more, the monks gathered for evening prayers, their voices a chorus of solemn devotion. Brother Thomas, feeling a sense of duty, volunteered to keep watch through the night. He believed that his faith would protect him from any evil that might lurk in the shadows. The hours dragged on, the monastery eerily silent, except for the occasional creak of old wood and the distant howl of the wind. Thomas patrolled the corridors, his candle casting flickering shadows on the stone walls. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, but he forced himself to remain calm, repeating prayers under his breath. Near midnight, as he passed the entrance to the crypt, he heard it. A faint whisper, barely audible. Thomas. He stopped, every muscle tensing. Who goes there? He called out, his voice echoing off the stone walls. There was no response, only the oppressive silence pressing down on him. Gathering his courage, he pushed open the heavy door and stepped into the crypt. The air was colder here, and the darkness seemed to swallow the feeble light of his candle. He moved cautiously, his eyes scanning the rows of ancient tombs. The whisper came again, louder this time. Thomas, join us. His heart pounded as he followed the voice deeper into the crypt. He turned a corner and froze. Before him stood a spectral figure, its form barely visible in the dim light. It was a monk, his face twisted in an expression of sorrow and pain. Who are you? Thomas demanded, his voice shaking. The figure raised a hand, pointing to a dark corner of the crypt. Beware. The curse, it whispered, before fading into the shadows. Thomas stepped closer, his candle illuminating a small alcove. There, among the cobwebs and dust, he found a bundle of old, decaying robes. He reached out to examine them, but as his fingers brushed the fabric, an overwhelming sense of dread washed over him. Suddenly, the crypt door slammed shut, plunging him into darkness. The whispering grew louder, more insistent, as if a chorus of voices surrounded him. Panic seized him, and he stumbled back, dropping his candle. In the pitch black, he could feel cold hands grabbing at him, pulling him down. His screams echoed through the crypt, a desperate cry for help that went unanswered. By the time the monks found him the next morning, Brother Thomas was dead, his face frozen in a mask of pure terror. The discovery of Thomas's body sent shockwaves through the monastery. Fear and suspicion spread like wildfire, and the monks whispered among themselves about the curse. Abbot Gregory, his face grim, called for an emergency council. We must uncover the truth behind these events, he declared. Our faith is being tested, but we cannot falter. We must remain strong and united. As the monks prayed for the soul of Brother Thomas, Brother Samuel couldn't shake the feeling that the whispers had only just begun. And somewhere deep within the ancient walls, something malevolent was awakening. The monastery, once a beacon of serenity and faith, now stood shrouded in an oppressive atmosphere of fear and uncertainty. The tragic death of Brother Thomas had cast a long shadow over the remaining monks, their faith tested by the creeping darkness that seemed to seep from the very walls. Brother Benedict, the monastery's most dedicated scholar, was determined to uncover the truth behind the curse that had claimed his friend's life. Benedict spent long hours in the monastery's extensive library, poring over ancient texts and manuscripts. The history of their order was meticulously documented, but there were gaps, periods of time that seemed deliberately obscured or glossed over. His curiosity piqued. Benedict delved deeper, seeking out the oldest and most fragile documents. One evening, as the wind howled outside and the candles flickered fitfully, Benedict's eyes fell upon an old, leather-bound journal. Its cover was cracked and worn, the pages yellowed with age. The journal belonged to Abbot Matthias, who had led the monastery centuries ago. Benedict's hands trembled as he carefully opened it, sensing that the answers he sought lay within its pages. The journal detailed a series of mysterious events that had plagued the monastery during Abbot Matthias's tenure. It spoke of strange occurrences, whispers in the night, ghostly apparitions, and inexplicable deaths. The monks of that time had been convinced that the monastery was cursed, but the journal also hinted at something far darker, an ancient, forbidden ritual performed by desperate monks seeking to harness supernatural power. Benedict's heart raced as he read about the ritual, which involved invoking the spirits of the dead to gain knowledge and strength. The ritual had gone horribly wrong, unleashing vengeful spirits that had tormented the monks for years. Abbot Matthias had tried to seal away the evil, hiding the ritual's artifacts in a secret wing of the monastery that had been closed off and forgotten. With a growing sense of urgency, Benedict knew he had to find this hidden wing. He sought out Abbot Gregory, who listened intently as Benedict explained his findings. The abbot's face grew pale, but he nodded resolutely. If there is any truth to these writings, we must find the source of the curse and put an end to it. The next day, Abbot Gregory gathered a small group of trusted monks, including Brother Samuel and Brother Anthony, the monastery's handyman. Together with Benedict, they set out to find the forbidden wing. Armed with torches and a crude map sketched from the journal's descriptions, they navigated the labyrinthine corridors of the ancient monastery. After hours of searching, they came upon a section of the monastery that was unlike any other. The air was thick with dust, and the walls were covered in faded, grotesque frescoes depicting scenes of suffering and despair. At the end of a narrow passage, they found a heavy iron door, its hinges rusted with age. Brother Anthony used his tools to pry the door open, revealing a dark, musty chamber beyond. The room was filled with relics of the past, ancient tomes, strange artifacts, and the remnants of the forbidden ritual. In the center of the room stood a large stone altar, stained with what looked like dried blood. As they explored the chamber, Benedict's eyes were drawn to a particular artifact, a black obsidian dagger with intricate carvings. He picked it up, feeling a chill run through his body. "This must have been used in the ritual," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Suddenly, the temperature in the room dropped sharply, and a cold, malevolent presence seemed to fill the air. The monks felt a palpable sense of dread, and the whispers began anew, louder and more insistent than ever. "Leave this place. You are not welcome." The voices echoed through the chamber, growing more menacing with each passing second. Abbot Gregory stepped forward, holding his cross aloft. "We come in peace," he declared, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at his heart. We seek to right the wrongs of the past and free this monastery from its curse. The whispers grew to a cacophony, and shadows began to writhe and twist around them. Brother Samuel clutched his own cross, praying fervently. Benedict, still holding the dagger, realized what needed to be done. "We must destroy these artifacts," he shouted over the noise. "They are the key to the curse." With grim determination, the monks set about smashing the artifacts and tearing apart the ritual's remnants. As they did, the shadows grew more agitated, and the whispers turned to wails of anger and despair. The ground beneath their feet seemed to tremble, and the air crackled with energy. Finally, Benedict approached the stone altar, raising the obsidian dagger high above his head. With a final prayer, he brought the dagger down, shattering it against the altar. A blinding light filled the chamber, and the wails of the spirits reached a deafening crescendo before abruptly falling silent. The monks stood in stunned silence as the oppressive atmosphere lifted. The cold presence dissipated, and the room felt lighter, as if a great burden had been lifted from the monastery. Abbot Gregory, his face lined with exhaustion but filled with hope, turned to the others. "We have taken a step towards ending this curse," he said. "But we must remain vigilant. The past does not easily let go of its secrets." As they left the forbidden wing, sealing the iron door behind them, the monks knew that their ordeal was far from over. The shadows still lingered, and the whispers, though faint, had not been entirely silenced. They had found a glimmer of hope, a chance to reclaim their sanctuary from the darkness that sought to consume it. The atmosphere in the monastery remained tense, despite the monks' efforts to destroy the cursed artifacts. A sense of unease lingered, as if the spirits were regrouping, biding their time. The whispers, though fainter, had not entirely ceased. And now, the monks began to see things that should not be there. Brother Samuel was the first to encounter a spectral apparition. He was in the cloister, the early morning light casting long shadows across the stone columns. As he tended to the garden, he noticed a figure standing at the far end of the courtyard. It was a monk, but his robes were tattered and stained, and his face was obscured by a dark hood. "Brother, are you lost?" Samuel called out, but the figure did not respond. Instead, it turned and glided silently towards the old chapel. Samuel felt a chill run down his spine. He abandoned his tools and followed, his curiosity overcoming his fear. The figure led him into the chapel and vanished before his eyes, leaving Samuel alone in the cold, dimly lit space. He knelt at the altar, praying for guidance. As he did, he felt a cold breath on his neck and heard a whisper, barely audible. "Help us!" Shaken, Samuel fled the chapel and sought out Brother Benedict. "I saw something," he said, his voice trembling. "A monk, but not one of us. He led me to the chapel and then disappeared." Benedict listened intently. "You're not the only one. Others have reported seeing similar figures. Ghostly monks, appearing and disappearing without a trace." Brother Anthony, who had been working on repairing the ancient stone walls, had his own encounter. He was alone in the refectory, packing up his tools for the day, when he saw a shadow move out of the corner of his eye. He turned to find a monk standing in the doorway, his face twisted in pain and desperation. "Who are you?" Anthony demanded, but the figure simply raised a skeletal hand and pointed to the far wall, where a tapestry hung depicting the Last Supper. As Anthony watched, the tapestry seemed to ripple, and the figure faded away. Determined to understand what was happening, Brother Benedict began documenting these sightings. He gathered testimonies from the monks, noting the times and locations of the apparitions. Patterns began to emerge, pointing to specific areas of the monastery that seemed to attract the spirits. One night, As Benedict was reviewing his notes in the library, he felt a presence behind him. He turned to see a spectral figure, translucent and glowing faintly in the candlelight. It was an elderly monk, his face lined with sorrow. The ghostly monk reached out, and Benedict felt a wave of intense sadness wash over him. "Why are you here?" Benedict asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The apparition opened its mouth to speak, but no words came out. Instead, it pointed to a nearby shelf of books. Benedict followed its gaze and found a small, hidden compartment behind the volumes. Inside, he discovered an ancient manuscript, its pages brittle with age. The manuscript detailed a ritual of exorcism, a powerful rite that could potentially banish the restless spirits from the monastery. Benedict's heart pounded with hope. This could be the key to finally freeing the monastery from its haunted past. The next morning, Benedict shared his discovery with Abbot Gregory and the other monks. They gathered in the library, the ancient manuscript spread out on the table before them. "This ritual could be our salvation," Benedict said, "but it will not be easy. It requires a pure heart and unwavering faith." Abbot Gregory nodded solemnly. "We have faced great darkness, but our faith has not wavered. We will prepare for the ritual and pray for the strength to see it through." As the monks began their preparations, the spectral apparitions grew more frequent and more desperate. The spirits seemed to sense that their time was running out, and their whispers became cries for help. "Help us. Free us." One night, as the monks gathered in the chapel to begin the ritual, the air grew thick with a cold, oppressive presence. The ghostly monks appeared around them, their faces twisted in agony. The monks joined hands, their voices rising in a chorus of prayer. "Almighty God, we beseech thee to banish these spirits, to free them from their torment, and grant them peace." The candles flickered, and the shadows seemed to writhe and twist. The apparitions grew more agitated, their cries echoing through the chapel. But the monks did not falter. They continued their prayers, their faith a beacon of light in the encroaching darkness. As the ritual reached its climax, a blinding light filled the chapel, and the apparitions screamed in unison, their voices a cacophony of pain and despair. The light grew brighter, forcing the monks to shield their eyes. When it finally subsided, the spirits were gone. The chapel was silent and still, the air warm and clear. Abbot Gregory lowered his hands, his face lined with exhaustion but filled with hope. "We have done it," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "We have freed them." The monks fell to their knees in prayer, their hearts filled with gratitude. The monastery, once a place of fear and darkness, now felt like a sanctuary once more. But even as they rejoiced, a lingering doubt remained. Had they truly banished the curse, or was this just a temporary reprieve? Only time would tell. Despite the temporary relief brought by the exorcism, the atmosphere within the monastery remained tense. The monks went about their daily routines with a renewed sense of purpose, but could not shake the feeling that the darkness had merely retreated, lying in wait. Brother Benedict, convinced that the true source of the curse had yet to be uncovered, continued his research into the monastery's grim history. Late one evening, as Benedict scoured through old blueprints and documents, he found a faded map of the monastery. It depicted a wing that had been sealed off long ago, a part of the building that none of the current monks had ever seen or even heard of. This forbidden wing seemed to be the epicenter of the dark rituals mentioned in Abbot Matthias's journal. Determined to uncover the secrets hidden within, Benedict sought out Abbot Gregory and the other senior monks. "We must explore this forbidden wing," he urged. "I believe it holds the key to understanding the true nature of the curse." Abbot Gregory, though weary from the recent exorcism, agreed. If this is indeed the source, we cannot afford to ignore it. We will gather a group and investigate. The following night, a small group of monks, including Benedict, Samuel, Anthony, and Gregory, stood before the entrance to the Forbidden Wing. The air was thick with anticipation and fear as Brother Anthony pried open the heavy wooden door, its rusty hinges protesting loudly. Beyond lay a dark, narrow corridor, untouched for centuries. The monks entered, their torches casting flickering shadows on the stone walls. The corridor led to a large, vaulted chamber, its ceiling lost in darkness. The room was filled with ancient relics, occult symbols, and crumbling manuscripts. It was clear that this place had been used for sinister purposes. In the center of the chamber stood a large stone altar, similar to the one they had found before, but far more imposing. Surrounding it were various artifacts, including ceremonial robes, chalices, and a massive iron-bound book. The air was cold and oppressive, as if the room itself exuded malevolence. Benedict approached the altar cautiously, his eyes scanning the symbols carved into its surface. "This is where it all began," he murmured. "The rituals, the sacrifices. This altar is the heart of the curse." As he reached out to touch the iron-bound book, a sudden gust of wind blew through the chamber, extinguishing their torches and plunging them into darkness. The whispers began again, louder and more insistent than ever. "Leave, or suffer." Abbot Gregory raised his voice, trying to calm the monks. "Stay together. We must not let fear overcome us." The monks huddled close, relighting their torches with trembling hands. The flickering light revealed shadowy figures moving at the edges of the chamber, their faces contorted with rage and sorrow. The apparition seemed more substantial here, their presence more tangible. Benedict opened the iron-bound book, revealing pages filled with dark incantations and detailed descriptions of the rituals performed centuries ago. His eyes widened as he read about a final, catastrophic ritual intended to bind the spirits to the monastery forever, a ritual that had gone horribly wrong. "We must destroy this altar and these artifacts," Benedict said urgently. "They are the anchors that keep the spirits bound to this place." Brother Samuel, his face pale but determined, stepped forward. "I'll help. We need to end this, once and for all." The monks began to dismantle the altar, smashing the stone and burning the ancient robes and manuscripts. The spirits grew more agitated, their whispers turning to wails of anger and despair. The ground shook, and the walls seemed to close in on them, but the monks did not falter. As they worked, Benedict found a hidden compartment beneath the altar. Inside was a small, ornate box. He opened it to reveal a blood-red crystal pulsating with dark energy. "This must be the source," he said. "We need to destroy it." Abbot Gregory took the crystal, holding it high above his head. "With this, we banish the darkness from our home. May God grant us strength." He brought the crystal down onto the stone floor, shattering it into 1,000 pieces. A blinding light filled the chamber, and the spirits screamed in unison, their forms dissolving into the light. The ground shook violently, and the monks braced themselves, praying for deliverance. When the light finally faded, the chamber was silent. The oppressive atmosphere had lifted, replaced by a calm, peaceful stillness. The spirits were gone, their torment ended at last. The monks emerged from the Forbidden Wing, their faces marked with exhaustion, but also with relief and triumph. They had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. The monastery, though scarred by its past, was finally free from the curse that had haunted it for centuries. As they sealed the entrance to the Forbidden Wing, Abbot Gregory spoke solemnly. We have rid this place of its darkness, but we must never forget the lessons we have learned. We will continue to pray for the souls lost and ensure that such evil never takes root here again." The monks nodded, their hearts filled with a renewed sense of purpose and faith. The monastery, once a place of fear and despair, was now a beacon of hope and redemption. The days following the destruction of the cursed artifacts brought a sense of peace to the monastery. The monks resumed their daily routines with a renewed sense of purpose, their faith seemingly strengthened by their triumph over the darkness. However, the remnants of the past had not entirely loosened their grip. Unbeknownst to the others, the malevolent force had found a new vessel. Brother Gabriel, a quiet and introspective monk, began to exhibit strange behavior. At first it was subtle. Long, vacant stares, murmured prayers in an unknown tongue, and an increasing isolation from his brethren. Brother Samuel was the first to notice these changes. Gabriel had always been a steadfast companion, but now he seemed distant, as if a shadow had settled over his soul. One evening, as the monks gathered for Vespers, Gabriel's behavior became more alarming. He stood at the back of the chapel, his eyes fixed on the altar, unmoving. As the others began their chants, Gabriel's voice rose above them, reciting in a guttural, harsh tone that sent chills down their spines. "Vade retro satana, nunquam suad mihi vana." His voice twisted the Latin into something dark and ominous, his eyes rolling back into his head. Brother Anthony, who had been leading the prayer, stopped, and the other monks turned to Gabriel in shock. Abbot Gregory stepped forward, his face a mask of concern. "Brother Gabriel, what is the meaning of this?" Gabriel's body convulsed, and he fell to the floor, writhing in apparent agony. The monks rushed to his side, but as they touched him, he let out a scream that seemed to shake the very foundations of the monastery. His eyes opened wide. They were not his own. Dark, hollow voids stared back at them. "The darkness is not banished," Gabriel hissed, his voice a twisted amalgamation of his own, and something far more sinister. "It lives within me. You cannot escape it." Fear gripped the monks as they realized the malevolent force they had fought was now inside their brother. Abbot Gregory, maintaining his composure, directed the monks to carry Gabriel to the infirmary. "We must act quickly," he said. "We cannot allow this evil to take hold." Brother Benedict, drawing upon his knowledge from the ancient manuscripts, suggested performing an exorcism. "We have the ritual," he said. "It will be dangerous, but it is our only hope." As they prepared for the exorcism, the monastery was shrouded in a tense, foreboding silence. The monks gathered in the infirmary, their faces etched with fear and determination. Gabriel lay restrained on the bed, his body contorted as if in constant struggle. Abbot Gregory stood at the foot of the bed, holding the ancient manuscript. "In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, we call upon the power of the Almighty to banish this evil from Brother Gabriel. Let no darkness dwell within him." The monks began to chant, their voices rising in unison. Gabriel thrashed against his restraints, his screams mingling with their prayers. The room grew cold, and a palpable sense of dread filled the air. Shadows danced on the walls, and the whispers returned, more malevolent than ever. "Leave him!" Abbot Gregory commanded, his voice steady. "By the power of Christ, we cast you out!" Gabriel's body convulsed violently, and for a moment, it seemed as if the darkness would overwhelm them. Brother Benedict sprinkled holy water over Gabriel, his prayers fervent and desperate. "Sancte Michael Archangele, defende nos in proelio." As the exorcism reached its climax, Gabriel let out a final, ear-piercing scream. His body went rigid, then limp, as the dark presence seemed to dissipate. The shadows receded, and the coldness lifted. The room fell silent, save for the labored breathing of the exhausted monks. Gabriel's eyes fluttered open, and he looked around, bewildered but clear-headed. "What happened?" he whispered, his voice weak. Abbot Gregory knelt beside him, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "You were possessed by a dark force, Brother Gabriel, but it is gone now. You are free." Tears filled Gabriel's eyes as he realized the gravity of what had happened. "Thank you," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "I felt so lost, so afraid." The monks gathered around him, their hearts filled with relief and gratitude. They had faced the darkness once more and emerged victorious. But the encounter had left them shaken, a stark reminder that the evil they had battled was not easily vanquished. In the days that followed, the monks redoubled their prayers and rituals, fortifying their faith against any future encroachment of darkness. Brother Gabriel slowly recovered, his spirit bolstered by the support of his brethren. Yet the memory of the possession lingered, a haunting reminder of the fragile barrier between the world of the living and the realm of the supernatural. And so, the monastery stood resilient, its walls echoing with the chants of devoted monks. But beneath the surface, an uneasy peace settled, a tenuous truce with the shadows that still lurked in the forgotten corners of their ancient sanctuary. The monastery, despite the temporary relief brought by Brother Gabriel's exorcism, remained cloaked in an air of unresolved tension. The monks went about their daily rituals, but the memory of Gabriel's possession lingered heavily in their minds. They knew the darkness had not been vanquished entirely. It was merely biding its time, waiting for another moment of weakness. Brother Benedict, ever the scholar, spent countless hours in the library, searching for any remaining clues that might help them rid the monastery of the lingering malevolence. He pored over every ancient text and manuscript, desperate to find something they might have overlooked. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the library, Benedict stumbled upon a manuscript he had not seen before. Its pages were worn and brittle, the ink faded with age. The manuscript detailed a powerful exorcism ritual, one that required a significant sacrifice, but promised to purge even the most malevolent spirits. With a mixture of hope and dread, Benedict brought the manuscript to Abbot Gregory. The abbot read the text carefully, his expression growing more serious with each passing minute. "This ritual," Gregory said, his voice heavy, "it is our last resort. It demands great strength and unwavering faith from all of us, but the sacrifice it requires, it is not to be taken lightly." The monks gathered in the chapel, the air thick with anticipation. Benedict explained the ritual in detail. "We must gather at midnight, under the full moon. The ritual requires the presence of all the monks, each offering a piece of their soul's strength to banish the darkness. It will be exhausting, and there is a risk. If any of us falters, the ritual will fail." Brother Samuel, ever courageous, stepped forward. "We have faced the darkness before, and we have triumphed. We must do this, for the sake of our monastery, and for the souls still trapped here." The monks agreed, their resolve strengthened by Samuel's words. They spent the next few days in intense preparation, fasting and praying, fortifying their spirits for the challenge ahead. Each monk knew the risk, but their faith in their mission and in each other bolstered their courage. On the night of the full moon, the monks gathered in the courtyard, forming a circle around the ancient stone altar. The sky was clear, the moon casting an eerie glow over the scene. The air was still, heavy with the weight of what was to come. Abbot Gregory began the ritual, his voice strong and unwavering. We call upon the Almighty, the angels and the saints to aid us in our hour of need. We offer our strength, our faith, to banish the darkness that plagues this holy place. The monks joined hands, their voices rising in a powerful chant. The ground beneath them seemed to vibrate with energy, and the air grew colder. Shadows began to writhe and twist at the edges of the courtyard, drawn to the ritual's power. As the chanting grew louder, the shadows coalesced into dark, ghostly figures, their faces twisted with rage and pain. The spirits circled the monks, their whispers a cacophony of despair. You cannot banish us. We are eternal. Brother Benedict, his face pale but determined, focused his thoughts on the ritual. He felt a strange pull, as if his very soul was being drawn out of him, mingling with the others in a collective force of will. He could see the strain on his brothers' faces, but none faltered. Abbot Gregory raised his hands, the manuscript opened before him. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, we command you to leave this place. Return to the darkness from whence you came. The spirits screamed, their forms flickering as if caught in a fierce storm. The monks' voices rose to a crescendo, their combined strength pushing against the malevolent force. The air crackled with energy, and a blinding light erupted from the altar, engulfing the courtyard. The spirits wailed, their cries echoing through the night as they were pulled into the light, their dark forms dissolving into nothingness. The ground shook violently, and the monks held fast, their faith the only anchor in the maelstrom. Then, as suddenly as it began, the light faded, and the courtyard fell silent. The oppressive presence was gone, replaced by a serene stillness. The monks, exhausted but triumphant, fell to their knees in prayer, their hearts filled with gratitude. Abbot Gregory, his face lined with exhaustion but glowing with relief, spoke softly. We have done it. The darkness is banished. Our monastery is free. The monks embraced one another, their bonds stronger than ever. They had faced the ultimate test of their faith and emerged victorious. The monastery, once shrouded in fear and despair, now stood as a beacon of hope and redemption. As they returned to their chambers, Brother Benedict felt a deep sense of peace. The shadows no longer whispered, and the air was light and clear. The desperate plan had worked, and the monastery was finally free from the grip of the past. The monastery basked in a newfound tranquility after the monks' successful banishment of the malevolent spirits. The oppressive atmosphere had lifted, replaced by a sense of hope and renewal. Yet the monks knew their victory was fragile. Brother Benedict, ever the diligent scholar, continued to study the ancient texts, searching for ways to ensure the curse would never return. One evening, Benedict found a reference to a ritual of redemption in an obscure manuscript. The ritual promised to cleanse the monastery completely, purging any lingering traces of darkness. It was a final step, a necessary measure to seal their triumph and protect their sanctuary forever. Benedict immediately brought this to Abbot Gregory's attention. We have banished the spirits, but the stain of their presence may still linger, Benedict explained. This ritual could cleanse the monastery and secure our victory. We must perform it as soon as possible. Abbot Gregory agreed. We cannot leave any shadow of doubt. Let us prepare for this final rite. The monks gathered once more, this time in the chapel, their hearts filled with determination. The ritual of redemption required a series of symbolic acts, each monk playing a crucial role. It would be a test of their unity and their unwavering faith. As midnight approached, the monks donned their ceremonial robes and assembled around the altar. The air was thick with anticipation and solemnity. Brother Samuel lit the sacred candles, their flames casting a warm, comforting glow over the gathered monks. Abbot Gregory began the ritual, his voice resonating through the chapel. We gather here, united in faith and purpose, to cleanse this holy place. We call upon the divine to purify our sanctuary and protect it from any future darkness. The monks responded in unison, their voices echoing with conviction. We offer our hearts, our souls, and our faith. Let this place be sanctified, forever free from evil. Each monk stepped forward to perform a specific act. Brother Anthony sprinkled holy water along the chapel walls, his prayers a shield against any lingering malevolence. Brother Samuel, holding a sacred relic, circled the altar, his chants invoking divine protection. Brother Benedict read from the ancient manuscript, his voice clear and steady. We consecrate this ground. We sanctify these walls. Let no darkness enter. Let no evil dwell. As the ritual progressed, the atmosphere in the chapel grew charged with a divine presence. The air shimmered with a soft, ethereal light, and a sense of profound peace settled over the monks. They felt a warm, protective embrace, as if the very walls of the monastery were being infused with holy energy. For the final act, Abbot Gregory took a chalice filled with consecrated oil and anointed the altar. By this anointing, we seal our sanctuary. Let it stand as a beacon of light and faith for all time. As the oil touched the altar, a brilliant light erupted, filling the chapel with a radiant glow. The monks shielded their eyes, feeling an overwhelming sense of divine presence. The light pulsed, then slowly receded, leaving behind a serene stillness. Abbot Gregory knelt before the altar, his voice choked with emotion. It is done. Our sanctuary is cleansed. We are free. The monks fell to their knees, tears of relief and joy streaming down their faces. They had faced unimaginable darkness and emerged victorious, their faith stronger than ever. The monastery, once a place of fear and despair, was now a true sanctuary, its walls imbued with a holy light that would protect it for generations to come. As they rose and embraced one another, Brother Benedict felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The ritual of redemption had not only cleansed their sanctuary, but it also fortified their spirits. The shadows of the past were finally laid to rest, and the future shone brightly before them. In the days that followed, the monks continued their duties with renewed vigor. They tended to the gardens, maintained the ancient buildings, and welcomed pilgrims who sought solace within their hallowed walls. The monastery stood as a testament to the power of faith and unity, a beacon of hope in a world often shrouded in darkness. And so, the story of the cursed monastery became one of redemption and triumph, a legend whispered among the faithful. The monks had faced the ultimate test and emerged victorious, their sanctuary forever protected by the divine light they had invoked. The shadows no longer whispered, and the spirits of the past were finally at peace.